Greetings. I'm glad you're here today. Thanks for sticking with these videos. We're continuing our videos on business rules. Today, we're looking at a special topic called rule data sets. It's a very powerful tool to greatly simplify our business rules. It's slightly complicated to learn, but once you've mastered it, it will make life a lot simpler. The video today will have a section on theory in which we look at why and what are the situations where you want to use the rule data sets, and then we will actually create one in Sun Systems, and hopefully it will work. In this little subsection, we're just sort of talking about the theory of where and how you use rule data sets. As an overall summary statement, a rule data set brings a table into the rule-making environment. So let me just give you what I might call a positive example, and then we'll discuss, without really looking at it, possible negative examples. Let's consider the practice in SunPlus that for our account codes, we have a prescribed asset code prefix. So for our account 201-201, we want an asset code that starts with an L. And for account code 202-202, we want an asset code that starts with an I. All the way on down, 203 buildings, we want an asset code that starts with a B. And this goes down to depreciation as well. So for 209-202, we want an asset code that starts with an I, and 209-203, we want one that starts with the B, and so forth with accumulated depreciation. Now consider the idea that we would like in our ledger entry process. Let me focus on ledger entry function. On the ledger entry process, we would like to check to make sure that this rule is being followed. So for 201-201, when that is the account, only L asset codes could be connected. And for 202-202, only I asset codes could be connected. For our class example here, we're talking about the ledger entry process and not the asset setup process. I'm sure some of the bright young men and women following this video could do the exact same rule over in the asset setup. But for our class example, we are just doing the ledger entry. So it is possible that the asset code was set up wrong, and when it was being attached to the account, the error message comes up. Or it's possible that an incorrect asset is being picked up for the account being used, a careless mistake there. And so where I'm trying to attach an equipment that was set up correctly to 205 and I accidentally go pick up a vehicle, I would get the error message that would stop it. To understand how a data set rule is working, let's back up and just consider how would we build these business rules using only the skills that we have developed so far in this series of videos. That is, if we don't have data sets, how would we build this? And so what I have done is put together a little example of how we would do this just with the knowledge that we have from the previous videos. What it would take is a series of if statements. If account number equaled 201-201 and asset code did not equal L, two ifs. If account code equaled 201-201 and if asset code did not equal L, then stop processing. If account code equaled 202-202 and asset code doesn't start with an I, stop processing. Two ifs. All right, and so this is just sort of a little mock-up here of what the business rules would look like using the knowledge that we have so far. So if account code equals 201-201, yes. And if asset code starts with an L, then rule 1, yes, no, stop processing. If they were both yes, then you'd keep processing. And if account code equal 202-202, and if asset code equal I, yes, the account code equals that, but the asset code does not stop process. And we go all the way down. And so for every number on our chart over here, roughly 15 of these combinations, we would need 15 of these tandem if statements going all the way down. So that's what I meant by etc. We would need to have 15 rules and 30 if statements coming down here to depict that. And then we make a change. We want to add another one, a new account code, asset code combination comes up. Then we've got to come in here and doctor around inside of here and get that one added. What we're going to do with data set rules is add a table and then basically ask the question, does the combination exist? What you do with the combination existing, sort of speaking in general terms and leaving our example for a minute, the business rule is going to ask, does the combination exist? Well, we want to stop processing if the combination doesn't exist. But we could also do it the opposite logic, is that if the combination does exist, we want to stop processing. I can remember at Mission College where they were using cost of goods sold in my ministry department. The cost of goods sold account was only supposed to be used in the cafeteria. And so what I could do is come up with a list of all of my illegal combinations of accounts, the account and the function that might be illegal. And I just have a tally. They don't even have to be related. I just make a list of illegal account function combinations, and the business rule is simply going to see if it exists. If it exists, then it continues in the business rule and doing whatever you say. So that's the logic. We're able to bring a table into the business rule, and from that table, have the business rule check to see the existence of the combination. If the combination exists, then we can have the rule either do something or not do something, depending on what we want. That's sort of the spirit of data set rules. Now what we'll do is look at actually building the rule that does this checking between account number and an asset code prefix. After that introduction, we're ready to start using rule data sets in our rules. Using rule data sets involves all four of the center business rule functions. Before we go, just as a reminder, helping us with the vocabulary, I know it's coming up, we're going to need it. I want to make sure that we're clear on vocabulary. Each of these little things that the Sun systems can do, set up employees, set up a business unit, set up currency codes, do a ledger entry, do a payment run, create an asset disposal. Each of these things in the Sun system software is called a function. Now I'm just helping us so when I use the word function later on, and we're going to need to use the word later on, you know what I'm going to talk about. So every one of these little buttons here almost are all functions. That's a little bit unfortunate because we call our dimension a function and we also call an action of the software a function. I don't make it up, I just teach it. We just have to be careful that in this presentation we're going to use the word function a lot, and we're meaning here these buttons that can be pushed. You'll see why we need to make sure that we're clear on that language in a minute. But when we're dealing with business rules and we're using rule data sets, we will bring into play all four of these functions. Let me explain how they work together. Remember from the introduction that we are going to create a rule data set, which is basically nothing but a table. So we are going to take the configuration of the table and sort of to establish the table, we use this function here called rule data set keys. Rule data set key sort of establishes the table headings and how the table interacts back to the functionality of Sun systems. So the rule data set key establishes the table, but the rule data set is the actual table which has the data in it. We will set up the key and then set up the table. Then we write a rule that uses the table, and that rule can evoke a message. And that's the interaction between the four. The rule data set keys create a table, so to speak, and then rule data set functionality here puts data in the table we created, and then a rule set writes a rule rule to use the data, and the rule set can bring up a message, and so the message would be in there. Probably the logical process would be to set up a rule data set key, then populate the rule data set with data, write a rule that will bring this into play, and then on the fly we'll have to create the message that the rule is going to use. On a pure theoretical basis, you'd set all three of these up, including the message first, and then the rule set brings them all together. But I think you can understand how this thing is working. So our first part is to set up the table itself with the rule dataset key, and it actually is the hardest. It's not too hard, but it's the hardest part where you have to pay the closest attention. We're ready to dig into this a little bit deeper. In this section, we're looking at creating the rule dataset key, which basically establishes the logical structure of the table. So let's get started with that. We can name these things what we want: legal combinations of account code and asset code. These three items down here are the three column headings of our three column table, so to speak. So on our first column heading, I know you know this well by now, but our first column heading is the account code, and the second column heading is the asset code. But at this point, we need to reflect and be very careful and very clear. In the example that I'm using for class, we're running this combination test at the point the operator pushes the new line button in a ledger entry. We want this test, this business rule to test if this is the account, does it have the right asset code? It's valuable also, not only does it have the right asset code, but we can write the test that if this is the account code, then this is the asset code that needs to be there. And if any other combination, we won't let the entry go through. But right now, all we're doing is keeping it simple. We're going to say if it's 201, 202 is the asset code I. If it's 201, 203 is the asset code B. The important point I'm emphasizing here, and maybe overemphasizing, is that we're doing this on the ledger entry function at the point of new line. We're not looking for just any account code anywhere in Sun Systems. We are looking for the account code that has been entered by the operator into ledger entry. And we're looking at the asset code that has been entered by the operator in ledger entry. And I'm just telling you that's what our example is. And the point is so we have to know that so we go to the right place to pick up the right data. And having a clear head to be picking up the right data from the right place is the problem of using these data set rules. That is the only challenge, is just getting it structured right. So you have to be very clear. For example, we're not testing this at the point of creating the asset code. That would be a different business rule outside of this example. It still would use this table, but it would be outside of this example. Let's go over and get it going. And so the point is that we've got to come over here and go to the right place in all of this function data. So we've got the function data hierarchy. We've got to find the ledger entry functionality in this hierarchy. And so we go, okay. And I happen to know where it is, so I'm making it simpler than it is in reality. If you recall from previous videos, that it is a very complex world that we're talking about. Going to the data items is a massive maze of looking for what might be the things you want to use in your business rules. Well, it's the same thing here. So we've got to go to the right place to find the asset code for the ledger entry screen. Let me just do it at a run here for you. So I went there, and functions are where we are working on. Functions, okay. And we've got financials, we go okay. And we have ledger entry, and it's looking really easy. The only reason it's looking easy is I have practiced before recording this video to find where these things are, and it's not so simple. And so we're looking for account code if it's 201, 203. So we've got account code, not just any account code in any function, but the account code in the ledger entry screen. And then we go to the second item, and that's supposed to be the asset code, first letter, okay. And so we're coming down here, and we're going to the ledger entry screen, because the ledger entry screen is where we're testing this, not at the creation of the asset. Come over here, and And I just know about it because I practice, but it could easily be your biggest problem in using this is thinking up and finding the right data item for your business rule. That's to me the hardest conceptual thing to do. Make sure you've got your head together right on that. And also is the most technically difficult thing to do is to look through this maze and actually find what you're looking for. And we're wanting asset code position 1. And you can see now we've got it set up just like we want it. The first column of our table we're going to create is going to be the account code used in ledger entry and the asset code position 1 used in ledger entry. And we're done with the rule data set key and we're ready to go to the next section. So we've now established our table with the rule data set key, sort of established the structure, and now we'll put data in it with the rule data sets. It's not hard at all, hardly needs a video. Now, the funny or tricky part about it is that you really want to create your data. The way this thing is created, you need to insert the data in reverse order. You'll see it play out in just a minute. Just to remind you what our data is looking like, if I'm going to put it in reverse order, I want to start down here with these two. 209, 208 should be a 0 prefix. So we'll start that and we go demo. That's the table that I'm adding data to. The keystrokes here are very confusing. 209, 208 and we go 209, 208 and I'm hitting the tab button here and 209, 208 should be an asset code prefix of 0 and I put in not 0 of O and then I go okay and it says do I want to create it and I go yes and then I go okay and now I do insert. You can see why I did it backwards. I'm starting at the bottom and so now I'm working up. I'm doing 209, 207 and it should have a Z and so this is demo and I can just type in demo there and tab 209, 207 a Z and so I'll tab and do Z and I go OK and then I will do OK again and insert and I go demo here. I just type in demo DEMO and I'm making it look easy because I practiced before I did the demonstration here, but in fact it's slightly complicated because the keying is missing a little bit. So I'm at 209, 206 and it should be a V. Okay, so we're going to 209, 206 should start with a V and I go one OK and then I do OK again and then I do insert and then I do demo and 209, 205 is E and you may be interested to know that these can be imported, including the concept of creating an Excel sheet outside of the program that the controller keeps up to date and imports every week. New inventory prices, you see, so if an inventory item is so and so and so and so, use this price in your business rule, all kinds of possibilities. So it could be easily imported, insert, and you wouldn't want to do a small one like this, but you could see the possibilities there. Now, so I'm going to cut off the recording now so you don't get bored silly and put the rest of these things in, and then I'll come back and show it to you when I'm done. I have finished entering the data. Based on wisdom I hear from Carl and other smart people about this, they suggest that you insert one more row beyond what you really need and put a null value in there. And I think you'll see the value of that later on. It serves as a divider row to help you make sense out of having multiple of these tables around. Probably is a good idea to follow their guidance. And so we've created our table now, and the biggest problem with doing this is getting the keystrokes right with all of this entering OK and inserting, getting it so it's right. And you can see again, I built it in reverse order because insert doesn't go to the bottom, but insert puts the row at the top, and I think we're good to go. And so we can exit now, and we now have our data in our rule data sets. Now, if you go back to them, you want to go and work with it. I go rule data sets, and then if you click over here, it brings up all the rule data sets. See, I clicked right over here and brought up all the rule data sets. It took me a little while to figure it. And you can see these are all from all of the other projects in the system. And here are ours. And you can see the value of having the row, 0 row in there as a divider. Of course, it was built in reverse order. So it looks nice and tidy over here. And we're ready to go to our next step. Our next step is to create the rule message that we will use in our rule set. The project is, if there's not a legal combination of account code and asset code, we won't stop processing and throw out an error message. So we need the error message in a minute, so we'll go ahead and create it now. This is just like we did in the previous videos, and so we can make it different languages. So we'll call it check asset code. We go okay, yes, and make sure you are using the correct asset code prefix for this account. Something like that. Make sure you are using the correct asset code prefix for the account. So we got it and we're done. So that's the end of that step. So far we've set up the rule dataset key and populated the table. So we set up a table, populated it, and prepared the message we need, and rule sets pull together all of the 3 parts to make them work the way we want them to work. Start off just like we've done in previous ones. We have ledger entry, end of line. We go okay, and we want the rule code demo, okay, and we go yes. And we just come up with a short description, asset code check. And now we create the detail. Now, to help us educationally, I'm going to create a very simple one to get right to the point, but it won't be our final one, and I will explain why. So we're going to create a rule just like we've done before. If, and we go okay. Normally we've gone and grabbed the value here, and let's put this baby right there. And we've always sort of gone to function data hierarchy to pull account numbers or something like that. But now we're going to rule data sets, sort of a new place to go. So we go okay, and we see all the rule data sets, including our demo. So we say okay. And so if in this table that we created, okay, click OK, it exists. You see, it populated the exist in there by itself. Once I pulled the table up, it automatically looked for whether the combination is in that table. I don't need to tell it the logic. It wants just to look in the table and see if the combination is there. Now, what we do if it is there is up to us. So this is where we're making a decision on whether we want to use this to designate a sort of positive or negative. If it's not there, do so-and-so, or if it is there, do so-and-so. And what we want for our case is we want, if it is not there, we'll come down and evoke the rule. Our next line, so we will say error. If you don't have a legal combination, stop processing. It's an error, and we'll bring up the error message. And then we need to put an X in rule number 1. Basically, then we're good to go. This is basically saying if you do not have the legal combination in your table, no, stop processing, and put up this error message. And so that really is the end of our demonstration, but I will tell you there's a serious problem with this rule if we left it right now. And that is, right now, this would stop every other journal entry, because right now it is looking for that legal combination. If the legal combination is not there, it stops. So I could have an account code right now that has nothing to do with fixed assets, and it's going to stop because it's not in that table. I'm sorry for the slight disconnect here, but I have revise the rule to properly focus the business rule on just ledger entries involving fixed assets. I think I've got it right here. So if the account code is greater than 200,000, you can remember that fixed assets go from 200,000 up to 299,000. Okay, looking at the range of fixed asset. So only on accounts that are in that range 200,000 to start with 20 and go to 209, 209. So those are the range. And so I believe this filter here only applies the rules when the account is between those two numbers. We'll test this. We need to carefully test this business rule, as with all business rules, to make sure that it's working only for fixed asset accounts and it's not interfering with accounts less than 200,000 or greater than 209,000. And so I believe that captures it correctly. In this section, we want to test our business rule. We're going to run two tests. The first one is less exciting, and that is the test that it doesn't work when it is not supposed to work. We'll go to ledger entry. It's not a real exciting test, and we'll do a JV, and we'll do OK, and we'll do demo here, and we're going to pull up the cash account, for example. This is the Bank of America account, one of my favorites here, and we put in $1,000 entry. What we want in this case is that when I push new line, nothing happens and the new line is created. We don't want it to stop our process because the asset code and the account code combination is not in our table, but we would like to get past the first line of our business rule that says only apply this to the fixed asset account. So when I click new line, nothing is supposed to happen. So we go new line and it worked just peachy. Our business rule didn't interfere where it wasn't supposed to be working. And so we go no and yes. And so now the next test is that we want to put in an illegal combination. And so this is a JV. I think we probably need to run 3 tests, come to think of it. Here, let's put in an illegal combination, demo, and we go OK. And we're going to choose the equipment account is 205, 205. And let's say we bought $1,000 of furniture and equipment. And then we came over here in our fixed asset and we accidentally picked up the wrong asset code, and that would be L. 205, 205 is supposed to start with an E, but we picked up an L by mistake, and we come in here and we've got the asset 205, 205 and a L prefix, an illegal combination, and we go new line and let's see what happens. And we got this error message right here. This is our error message. Make sure you're using the correct asset code prefix for the account. Our error message worked correctly. So now we have one more test to do, and that is it will come over here to fixed asset and we'll change it to an E, change the prefix to an E, the account we're using to an E like it's supposed to be, and we go over here. The next test is when it's right, will it let it, and we go new line, and it worked just fine. So our business rule seems to be working just peachy. Thanks for listening to this, and I hope it's done you some good, and thank you for your continued support in the Sun Plus world.